time because it's important business. We are at the tail end of this bill, and at drawing the deliberations of the committee are drawing to a close. I expect that we will sort of wrap up our analysis and review of schedules today, and thereafter the amendments will be prepared, the report will be prepared. We will have the opportunity to review and either together in a meeting or otherwise to sign off on the report for it to go back to Parliament. But before doing that, we have just one or two literally issues to resolve. So I don't expect this meeting to be as long as previous meetings, and we'll proceed to do that right away. Ms. Edwards, I'm going to ask you to just remind us of what those issues are so that we can begin right away.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman. The issues that we had outstanding related to concerns that were raised about clause 262, subclause 2, and the consultation requirement. Should I deal with each as I?
Right. So you remember last week, there's a principle of consultation that's embedded in the bill, embedded in the framework before major changes are made. And we had a little debate last week about how that consultation needs to be refined to take into account practical considerations without abandoning the concept or reversing on the concept. And the points made by Member Hilton are accepted and well-founded, even as I believe he understands the point that I was making. I believe the Customs Agency has come up with a compromise that hopefully will satisfy Member Hilton and satisfy the position that I represent. And I'll ask Ms. Edwards to just take us through that.
Thank you, Chairman. So the proposed alternative approach is that clause 262, subclause 2 remain unchanged. Apply to, we will list the exceptions and notice under section 27.1 or section 30, subsection 1. So that's 27 subsection 1 or section 30 subsection 1. B, changes to duty rates or tariff rates. C, measures that have a relieving effect. D, measures the effectiveness of which will be undermined as a result of compliance with subsections 2 or 3. E, measures applied in urgent circumstances. F, minor changes. G, measures relating to the internal administration of the Customs Agency. Measures relating to the prohibiting or restricting of the import or export of any goods. I, the delegation of any functions under this Act.
So what this approach does is to expressly carve out the exceptions to the consultation requirement along the lines that we discussed last week. Where if you were to intersperse the or if you were to consolidate the points that were made while preserving the consultation requirement in all other instances. And here the practical circumstances listed A to I where it would work against, we have the principle of consultation, but we have other principles as well. And the principle of consultation would work against other very important principles if we didn't have these carve-outs. For example, the ones that have been mentioned, urgent circumstances, if the changes are minor in nature, if they would undermine if there's room for the measures being undermined, and measures that have a relieving effect where duties are being relieved, changes to duty rates and tariff rates, which is a tax policy matter, and it's not doesn't fall under the principle for which the consultation is being sought. And any notice under section 27.1 or section 31, both of which have to do with the designation of ports and so forth. So just putting that out as a compromise, having had the discussion last week, and Customs Agency having had the time to reflect on that discussion.
I also wish to add, Chairman, that this approach is also consistent with the WTO Agreement on Trade Facilitation and is in fact reflected at Article 2, 1.3.
Yeah, and Chairman, my general observation is that that approach, I believe, is more, is certainly supportable and in line with and consistent with the preservation of those two principles or approaches that were outlined. I just there's one of the A2, I think it was I. There's one towards the end that I wasn't quite clear on, and that is the prohibition of goods. Now, it would seem to me, first of all, there could be two aspects to the subsections that are concerning, and one is I believe that it's generally agreed that the principle of consultation is observed and important. The question then is the requirement of 21 days, which at times could be just onerous or inimical in circumstances. But it seems to me that the consultation can still be had. It's just that the requirement for 21 days or a minimum of 21 days could be flexible. So that, for example, if someone is operating a business and there's investments made and arrangements made, and then there's a need for a prohibition, something, some threat to health or some such thing, that the requirement that there be quick consultation, not restricting it to the 21 days, I think could still be observed. So the principle of consultation could still be observed with the requirement that it be for 21 days or any new measures to take effect, that it would have to be limited to or constrained by the 21-day requirement. Again, I'm trying to see how we square the commercial imperatives, people who are invested in an activity is ongoing, and where there's a need for, and this kind of falls within this sort of emergency principle, but it could be more specific, perhaps relating to health requiring prohibition, that we could observe some semblance of the consultation with the flexibility that a 21-day requirement not be observed in those situations.
Ms. Edwards, you wanted to go take that first?
And just for clarification, Member Hilton, your concern is only in respect of the matter of the prohibiting or the restricting of the import of goods.
Yeah, because I think generally emergency situations sort of recommend themselves, either they're emergencies or not. And if you claim emergency, then you'd have to articulate some basis for that, or or that could be the basis of some objection. And so the concerning area is where there is a basis for a prohibition. The question then is
that is not an emergency.
right. Emergency, right? That is not an emergency. Seems to me you don't need to dispense with the rule for consultation, but the period could be constrained, or could be, could not, you wouldn't have to be subjected to the 21-day requirement.
May I say something? Let's just Ms. Easley can tell us
Please go ahead, Minister.
Right. The true need for the 21 days, so we can hear the full implications for the 21 days. Because I do agree with Member Hilton that outside of the emergency, there might be other things that business necessitates acting earlier, but it's not an emergent nature. So can we just understand a little bit more why the 21 days, please?
Rationale for prescribing that there should be consultation of not less than 21 days?
Yes.
Well, the consideration at the time was we needed to prescribe a period within which consultations must occur, because in the absence of a period, then there will be uncertainty on the part of customs as well as on the part of the stakeholder. We wanted a period that wasn't upfront too long, because we had to think of the importance of moving certain measures quickly, but at the same time, we didn't want it to be too short. So if it had been 7 days or so, then we thought that would be onerous. So what we sought to do was to set a floor. And so the floor is not, that's why the provision says not less than 21 days. So that's just the minimum time period. If the proposed measure is particularly complex, then reasonably, whether it's the minister or the commissioner would allow for more time, but at least stakeholders will know that they have at least 21 days. And after much discussion and interchange with stakeholders, 21 days was the time period that represented a compromise position as being the floor.
Okay, thank you. And important words I think you end up with is after stakeholder consultation. So if all of those persons were in fact seized of the need for a consultation period and the 21 days was a compromise, then I guess in their interest, they would have been protecting their interests. So the fact that you had that consultation and the agreement, well, that speaks for itself.
Yes, I won't misrepresent and say that stakeholders were entirely happy with the 21 days, right? And as I said, that is why it is phrased that way. It doesn't say a consultation period of 21 days, but of not less than, right? So it represents a compromise position. And in terms of acting in good faith going forward, once it is that we reasonably look at it and realize that the complexity of the issue or the volume of the regulations that are being put forward will require more time, then we will be engaging with our stakeholders on that. In exchange, also, in the reverse, if the stakeholders recognize that they need more time, they can also engage with us on it and remind us that the regulations say not less than. So reasonably, may we have a longer period of time. And we thought that that would, give us a reasonable basis on which to go forward.
Well, just to be pointed, the question that I'm really posing is that in the case of a prohibition, it seems to me that in the main, that will qualify as an emergency. If the basis or the conditions exist for a prohibition. right? 'Cause that would really, in the way that would normally occur, there's some development, there's some new bit of information about a product or some activity that requires the government to step in and to prohibit the importation into the island of certain goods or material. In that situation, the emergency rule could be easily invoked. But if you break it out specifically and say prohibited goods, then it raises in my mind, if it doesn't fall in the emergency category, then on what other bases would you want to summarily or dispense with the 21-day consultation?
So here, let me see if I can help. I totally understand what you're saying, but here are a couple of examples. Well, I start with one, and this is a constructed example. A particular model or make of a car. Autonomous vehicles have just been introduced, and we have started importing them and doing well. And then, all of a sudden there are all these crashes taking place, God forbid, in Spain, and they find out that there is something wrong with the brake system, and there's a recall of all the autonomous vehicles, right, from that particular manufacturer. Well, it may not be considered an emergency because there are no crashes in Jamaica yet, but based on what the supplier has admitted to, right, the health authorities and the traffic authorities are such that, look, we need to stop importation of that particular vehicle, right? It's not considered emergency in the classic sense, but should we wait, 21 days before that can happen, a minimum of 21 days before we can prohibit importation of that car on the basis of social health?
But why wouldn't that come under emergency? Seems to me that's a classic need for quick emergency.
Well, it may not be considered an emergency because nobody's dying in Jamaica in that example.
But the threat exists, and that would be derived from evidence elsewhere. The risk exists, and we'd say, look at what is happening in Spain, or here are the objective evidence elsewhere, and we'll applaud it and we say, look, we need to.
Suppose there is, we realize that a certain material has been imported into Jamaica and has been used to, it has other purposes, but now we find it's being used to make, bullets, and we are under, elevated, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, in other words, something can be important, but not considered an emergency. And that is what I think the Jamaica Customs Agency is trying to, something can be considered important, but not an emergency. And it's important that it's prohibited.
Yeah, Minister, I see what you're struggling with.
So why don't we then let's strike a compromise and go with what Member Hilton was saying for the prohibition? Just find a way to say that in the case of prohibition,
consultation will be had, but the 21-day rule may not be strictly applied.
Reduce it to 7 days.
All right. I see your effort. Your effort.
Prohibition outside of emergencies.
Yeah. All right. I'll go along.
Is that something we can live with, Ms. Edwards?
Yes, Chairman. In fact, if we were to take it out.
Yes, it's good enough.
All right.
Yeah. Next time you say anything that make Member Hilton jump in again. All right. Okay, good. Wonderful. That's good progress. The next items are smaller, but we still need to deal with them. You want to go through?
Yes. So the next issue relates to the first schedule, the section B, what I've revised as a section B, list of total and partial exemptions. And you'll recall that in the discussions last week, January 20th, we had noted that, well, Minister Malabu Fort had recommended that we look to see if there's a way in which we could adjust some of the quantities and the allocations more easily. And so the recommendation there is to insert a provision to allow the minister by order, subject to affirmative resolution, to amend the quantity or type of goods identified in Part 3, productive input release for the production of primary products and the manufacture of goods. Part 4, productive inputs relief for the tourism industry. Part 5, productive inputs relief for the creative industry. Part 6, productive inputs relief for the healthcare sector. And Part 7, productive inputs relief for meetings, incentives, conventions, and expositions.
Yeah, Minister, I think I was the one that raised it initially as it relates to the amount of cars.
The rental cars.
What you have just said, Hazel, in terms of giving the minister the authority, that would satisfy my my concern.
And this is done, this is in relation to what?
I think I made the point there is somewhere that there's 1,000 cars. And I made a point, speaking from JAMPRO, as JAMPRO chairman, that the hotel industry is expected to grow significantly. So you want some amount of flexibility in there. So I think what Hazel is saying is that the minister will have that flexibility to adjust accordingly based on the circumstance. Is that correct, Hazel?
Yes, that is the proposal.
Yes, and I'm saying, Member Hilton, that I'm satisfied with that proposal based on my initial concern.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it so broadly. I mean, because when you say, you're saying the way you've written it here, Hazel, is that it's any item in Part 4 can be adjusted? Or just a numerical value?
It's right, so it would be the numerical value. So speaking to the quantities or the numerical values or the types of goods, because there are certain types of goods that are listed that persons may receive relief on or not receive relief on. So there'll be the option to make that adjustment.
So
yeah, I was more referring to Minister on the numerical value, some flexibility there.
Yes.
Right.
I use the expression quantity, but yes, it's this, I'm referring to the numerical value. So it's whether it is 100 or, you know, you'd have the option to move that to 200.
So right now, to do it without this amendment, you would have to draft an amendment bill to change it.
Yes, I see CPC is indicating.
I'm sorry, I'm just drawing attention to the provision now in clause 3.1 of the bill that does allow for the first schedule to be amended from time to time by resolution of the House of Representatives.
Oh, so it's there already then?
Clause 3.1.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Indeed, it is there.
Okay, well, it just shows that we're consistent then, that
Yes.
when it looked as if it
Indeed.
wasn't going to be there, the committee was determined to put it back. So it's there. All right, that's a good sign, because we passed clause 3 many moons ago, many months ago. So the fact that we're contemplating something consistent with that gives me some reassurance that we're being consistent across the 800 pages.
But
Thank you.
I also share your concern, Minister, that you want to limit the
Yeah. Look, it's a double-edged sword.
Minefield. Huh? Okay.
Yeah, double-edged sword.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the next one. We had something with the meetings, incentives, and conventions and expositions the last time.
Yes, we do.
Go ahead.
Yes, we do. And in relation to that, I will ultimately defer to taxation policy, but just to summarize it briefly, the provision is at page 818 of the bill, part 8, goods imported for meetings, incentives, conventions, or expositions. Paragraph 1, provided that goods are exempt from customs duty, where the commissioner is satisfied that the goods are imported for consumption, otherwise than by sale, at a meeting, incentive, convention, or exposition approved by the minister responsible for tourism. The policy position is to make it clear that the goods imported for consumption should not include, the benefit is not being extended to food items. So food or beverages, those are excluded from the benefit. And the taxation policy will probably want to speak to it in a bit more detail. Anything more?
Good afternoon.
Before you come in, you want to speak to it, Ms. Ramsey?
Yes, Minister. We were just, in terms of the rationale for putting in that provision, we know that Jamaica as a destination, we are encouraging nice activities. However, we also are encouraging persons to come to Jamaica in terms of the gastronomy and all of those things. And you wouldn't want to create this opportunity where persons coming here to enjoy Jamaica also walk with their food, and then you would be depriving the local industry in terms of being able to satisfy the demands that they would have. So that was part of the rationale for us indicating that food items should not be included. And over the years, we have not had much in terms of persons seeking to import food. There's just some exceptional cases, and I think they can be probably dealt with elsewhere. So that was part of the rationale. And in terms of the whole matter, the policy intent with respect to MICE activities, we know that the items that, in terms of the whole matter of consumption, and the CPC last week indicated that she could put in words to the effect to be consumed in the particular activity event. We were just thinking, just to make it clear that we understand that items to be more consumed at the event would be items that were used up at the event, so you won't have any residue, anything. You don't dump them like your brochures, most of them dump or they go back out, and consumables, and the items that would come in essentially in bulk, and they would be re-exported on an individual basis. So that is the essence of what we were thinking about in terms of consumption in the MICE activities.
Thank you very much for that exposition. Senator Allen, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you very much, Minister. I'm happy to hear the clarification from Ms. Ramsey. I believe, based on my experience in the tourist board and having to deal with MICE activities, there are times when specialty items are being sought they're seeking to bring in specialty items that cannot be found in Jamaica, sometimes kosher items as an example. And as part of luring the business to Jamaica, there's a need to have the opportunity or the option to import certain items that cannot be found in Jamaica. So I'm just hoping that we are not impacting negatively that market by not allowing broadly food and beverage. And I understand and appreciate the reason for it, because you want people to consume as much as possible in Jamaica, Jamaican authentic products, etc., because there's money to be made. So I just wanted to point out that note and to see whether it would be considered and how it could be considered elsewhere.
Thank you, Senator Allen. Thank you.
Minister.
Yes, Member Hilton.
I share the view, the concerns raised by Member Allen, but I was also wanting to raise, I see that this is limited to what the tourist board or the tourism ministry will approve, but my understanding is that some of these incentives, and while it's related to conventions, I take note of the fact that the entities like the Special Economic Zone Authority and even JAMPRO may have the need for involvement in certain promotional activities. Why is it limited to? And I know you want to restrict the authorizing entity just for control and for effect, but if the industry ministry, for example, under which both JAMPRO, well, at least in this new dispensation, both JAMPRO and the certain industrial inputs and administration falls? Why wouldn't they too would be able to, and I'm speaking specifically now, say that this special economic zone authority.
The reason I remember is that, you know, all of those other industries, we have productive input relief for those industries, even in this own act. What we're trying to do here is to create a new industry or a new sub-industry, the MICE industry, meetings, what do you call it? Internet convention. And the input into their productive process consists of the paraphernalia that you get at a conference and so on, which you probably need to import. And we're saying those inputs into your product, you can bring in without paying duty, but those inputs cannot include food or beverage.
No, I get it. The question was really narrow.
Right. No, so I'm saying that you cannot compare the things that are essential to the productive process for other industries. We have similar provisions. And here we're just putting the provision for them, you know, for a very specific industry, the MICE industry.
Okay.
The thing that they need, and we don't. It's nascent in Jamaica, but it could be an area of substantial growth to the point. You know, we have.
So Minister, if I'm understanding the discussion correctly, this is really focused on building the convention industry, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. Somebody earlier in the meeting mentioned that there are limited amount of cases in the past. I'm not sure if you can relate to me.
Okay. So the convention business in Jamaica is, you know, still small.
Yes, very much so.
That what happens now is that people have to apply for waivers to introduce the paraphernalia that they may need, whether it be, you know, a book. What do you call that?
You understand some promotional items.
Or a coffee item, promotional items, and so on. What you're saying is that the tax department rarely gets requests for waivers of bringing in food. And when that has happened in the past, it has been in very exceptional cases, and those exceptions can still be dealt with. But the demand, you know, it does not warrant a wholesale allowance of food and beverages to be brought into Jamaica duty-free, God forbid, for the purposes of facilitating the conference industry. That would just
I got you.
Minister,
I'm clear. Thank you.
Yeah.
Minister, Ms. Allen made reference to the items for the food items for religious purpose. I think she referenced. And if it is that we allow this to remain as it is, those items would not be included in the relief. I'm not sure if the minister or the team would want to create some sort of little provision that would allow under certain circumstance that specified items of food for a particular purpose.
No.
They don't, right. So that means we would not be able to facilitate those.
Yes. I think I heard from everybody who has spoken, I think we're kind of uniform on that.
Right.
And very sensitive to the fact that we're trying to increase the linkages in our economy. Our tourism industry right now is hugely import dependent, and we would like to find ways to reverse that. Certainly, this, by allowing food and beverages to come in duty free for the purposes of the convention industry would simply deepen our dependence, and not, which I think runs counter to the policy position of Jamaica that has spanned multiple administrations. I don't think we need to be detained any further on this point. And if CPC can just incorporate what has been discussed, which I believe has been sent or will be sent over. Any other matter, Ms. Edwards?
One final matter. I had it at the last meeting, Minister, and I think you had mentioned, you directed my attention to it. But just for the purposes of the minutes, I think it may be important for me just to mention part 6, productive input release for the creative industries. It's at page 818, paragraph 1.1, and for the words of customs to be deleted, just for the purposes of the minutes.
All right, so that members of the committee brings us to the end of the clause by clause analysis. Now, this bill is so long, 800 pages, including all of the schedules, that it is quite possible that in putting together the list of amendments and finalizing the revised Customs Act, that we could come across something here or there that probably needs to be addressed. And if that is the case, we will do so. I believe what happens from here is the committee still remains intact, and while the CPC works with the Customs Agency and with the Attorney General's chambers to prepare the list of amendments, and the Houses of Parliament prepares the report from the committee. And once those are ready, we reconvene to approve them. And once they're approved, the committee can be dissolved, as we would have the product with which to return to the Houses of Parliament. It is my hope that the report and the amendments can be prepared expeditiously and put us in a position, Member Hilton, where we can have the Customs Act with the amendments, or maybe a redraft, we're gonna, well, we made a decision later, tabled in Parliament in time for us to have this debated and passed within the first quarter of the next fiscal year.
Minister, I certainly am on board in terms of the need for us to move with all deliberate speed to get this important area of customs reform in place, and therefore consistent with the need for just being careful and prudent, because we know that once this is passed, it's another 40 years or so before it's revisited. So I think with all due deliberate speed, I think we should get it in, and I'm hopeful that we can get it passed in this first quarter as well.
Thank you so much, Member Hilton, for the endorsement of the importance of this. And let me thank everyone for attending this afternoon. I did promise you that the agenda will be short and sweet. Certainly, you have earned it, because we have had multiple long sessions. So just thank you for making yourselves available again on short notice. Thank you, Member Hilton, for supporting me in calling the meeting at short notice. And it's good to be at this stage, and we look forward to receiving the report and the list of amendments from the respective agencies when they are ready. And at that time, we will give you some time to at least review what will be circulated. And after you've had a chance to review it, we'll call the next meeting of the Joint Select Committee and take it from there. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank the staff. Ms. Edwards.
Thank you, Minister.
And the staff.
Thank the Customs Agency, thank the Ministry of Finance, thank the Tax Policy Division, thank CPC, thank the Attorney General's chambers. The work that has been put into this, a book should be written.
And Ms. Edwards in particular for yeoman service.
Ms. Edwards,
Thank you.
the intellectual capacity that is taken to marshal this is absolutely incredible.
Commendable.
commendable, very much so. But wait, we have to we want to finish it. And we'll have, remember Hilton, we will be superfluous in our commendations. But let's get to the finish line.
Encouragement, sweeten labor.
Sweeten labor, indeed. All right, thank you all again. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Recording.
Jamaica, home of the resilient.